to the entertainment Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the new offensive coordinator, Jason Garrett, for the New York Giants, and whether or not his new offensive philosophy could influence who the New York Giants take with the number 4 overall selection. Of course, a lot of New York Giants fans want Isaiah Simmons, and for good reason. He's a guy that would fit this defense perfectly, and he's a playmaker. He's a guy that a lot of New York Giants fans will love. And taking an offensive lineman, let's be fair, is boring. There's no doubt about it. It is certainly not the sexiest of picks. It's not a playmaker. It's not a wide receiver like a Jerry Jeudy or an Isaiah Simmons, a guy that's going to get after the quarterback. But it is vitally important to have a strong offensive line, particularly, specifically in this offense under that of Jason Garrett. Any offense, really, but this offense specifically, because it takes time for these deep patterns to develop, and you need your quarterback to be able to have time to throw the football. So it got me thinking that it's quite possible the New York Giants could take Andrew Thomas at number 4, or they could look to trade down, or whichever offensive lineman of your liking. Jedrick Willis, Tristan Wirfs. Those are the 3 names we're seeing at the top of the draft boards, and maybe the New York Giants will, in fact, take an offensive lineman. Of course, we all know that Dave Gettleman's philosophy is hog mollies. That's all he's ever said since he's gotten here. That's what he calls offensive linemen. He says he believes in building in the trenches. He's done that a lot on the defensive line by bringing in big bodies, whether it be Leonard Williams, B.J. Hill, Dexter Lawrence. You go down the list. There's a number of guys that he's brought in on the defensive side. He's traded for Kevin Zeitler. He's drafted Will Hernandez. He's not used a first-round pick yet on an offensive lineman. But when I go over the history of the Dallas Cowboys and what Jason Garrett's offense needs to be successful, I think you may agree with me that there's at least a strong possibility that they may very well be going with an offensive tackle in the first round, unless, of course, they address it in free agency with a Conklin. But I definitely think heavy focus needs to be paid, on the offensive line this offseason. There's no doubt about it. This offense will not be successful with a mediocre offensive line. With a West Coast offense, you could get by because it's short passing routes, things of that nature. And you can get by with a subpar offensive line. Not with an offense like this. And we've neglected the offensive line for far too long. Yeah, we've tried. We spent a first-round pick on Eric Flowers. Didn't work out. We've tried on Justin Pugh. But we've got to spend an early first-round pick on an offensive lineman. If not this year, next year. It's going to have to happen eventually. And it might take multiple first-round picks. You look at this offensive line. Solder's going to be off the team after next year, probably. We'll cut him. Halapio's not a starting offensive lineman. Remmers is gone. That's 3 holes you have to fill, not to mention Zeitler's no spring chicken. He's like 31. They need to get youth and depth on this offensive line, and it needs to start this offseason. So we'll have to wait and see what they do with this first-round pick, but I think it became more likely and possible that they could go with a tackle there at number 4, or they could trade down and try to get a tackle at number 6, 7, 9, whatever it may be. So let's jump into the video. Let's jump into some of the things I pulled out in terms of why I think it's more likely that they could go offensive lineman than possibly 2 days ago before Jason Garrett was brought on to be the offensive coordinator. So the first thing I wanted to look at was, and there's Andrew Thomas, was what I brought up in the Jason Garrett video. What the Air Coryell system needs is a strong line. Given that the quarterback is targeting downfield receivers and the running game uses a power scheme against a numbers advantage, it's important that the O-line is among the best in the league. The West Coast offense can operate with smaller players and mask their deficiencies with movement and speed. The Coryell offense cannot and requires significant investment in the O-line in order to produce consistent results. And that's exactly, when you go back and look at history, what the Dallas Cowboys did. And we may hate the Dallas Cowboys. We may not like the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm going to give credit where it's due. They had a strong offense under Jason Garrett's tenure there. And the biggest reason was because of this. Look what they did in their draft. If you go back to 2011, they spent the 9th overall pick on Tyron Smith. Well, Tyron Smith has been an all-pro offensive lineman for them. And he's been great. He's been one of their best players for quite some time. They've had him there now for 8-9 years, and they invested. They invested an early pick on the O-line, and it paid off. And that is why the guy that they took in the 3rd round there, DeMarco Murray, was as successful as he was that year, I think in 2014 or so, when he rushed for almost 2,000 yards. Look what happened to Murray after he left the Cowboys. Look what happened to McFadden after he left the Cowboys. These guys were not as successful. So the O-line definitely has a lot to do with the running back success in that system. It also gives Dak Prescott the necessary time to make the throws that need to be made. And that is where Garrett started. Garrett became the head coach, I think, in 2011 or maybe 10. And he started right out of the gate taking offensive linemen early on. And it certainly was a good decision. The next thing we're going to pull up is 2013, 2 years later. Travis Frederick. It was a late first-round pick, but nevertheless, they invested another first-round pick, number 31 overall in the center, Travis Frederick. Another guy who's been an All-Pro selection. He's got 1 All-Pro. You see it right there, 5 Pro Bowl selections. So the guy's been great. Travis Frederick has been fantastic for them. And again, another first-round pick invested on that offensive line. You go down the next year, 2014. Zack Martin, a guy who I actually wanted the New York Giants to take. I think that's the same draft as Odell Beckham, so we couldn't really complain there. But Zack Martin, since he's been in the NFL, look what he's done for them at the guard position with the 16th overall pick. 4 All-Pro selections. He's made 6 Pro Bowls in 6 years. So that is the bread and butter of the Dallas Cowboys offense, and that will be the bread and butter of the New York Giants offense if you want them to be successful. The Eric Coryell offense needs time to throw the football. Well, you need guys that can block in order to do that. Nate Solder's not going to get the job done, and I expect the New York Giants to invest a lot in free agency and a lot in the draft on bulking up this offensive line, and it may take 2 years to get it to where it needs to be, but that is what Dallas did, and that's what the New York Giants have started to do by trading for Kevin Zeitler, by drafting Will Hernandez early in the second round, kind of comparable to the 31st overall selection that we showed you with the second offensive lineman that the Cowboys brought in. I think Hernandez was like 34. So that's what the Giants have started to do, but I think they're going to continue to do that and need to continue to do that. I personally think a trade down would probably be the best case scenario, because if you trade down to 6 or 7 or whatever, you're probably still going to get one of those elite offensive linemen, and you're going to accrue more assets. So that is what I hope the New York Giants do, but I think it's becoming more and more likely that the Giants will look for an O-lineman in the first round of the draft. And if not the first, expect them to invest heavily in the second to third round. They need to get this offensive line to where it needs to be for this system to perform properly. The next thing I wanted to pull up is where the New York Giants have ranked in terms of blocking last year. The New York Giants last year in terms of run blocking ranked 25th in the league right there. Cincinnati was 26, Jacksonville 27, Kansas City 28. You got to be able to block. Got to be able to block for this system to perform properly. And you invested the other thing on top of this, you invested an early first-round pick on Barkley. Well, for Barkley to perform up, to his full capabilities, you have to be able to block. So it's becoming more and more likely to me that they're going O-line early in this draft. And then the last thing I wanted to pull up was where they ranked in pass blocking last year. They were 18th. Again, subpar. You look at those Cowboys offensive line. The Cowboys, by comparison, this past year, I believe were first in run blocking and second in pass blocking. Or maybe it was the other way around. But regardless, they were in the top 2 or 3 in both aspects. And that is why Dak Prescott has been as good as he's been. Dak Prescott is not that good of a quarterback. There is a reason this guy went in the 4th round. But he's been successful in this system because they've gotten him weapons in an Amari Cooper and an Ezekiel Elliott, and they've built an O-line around him. And that is what I expect Jason Garrett to do for the New York Giants. Could he use another weapon? Absolutely. We could use another wide receiver. Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, they're pretty good. Slayton's been solid on the outside. But it is much more important to this offense to build that offensive line, to protect your second-year quarterback in a Daniel Jones. I say it all the time. We cannot make the same mistake that the New York Jets made with Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold, the Jets had $100 million to spend, and they spent almost none of it on the O-line. Instead, they got a running back to run behind an O-line. They can't block, kind of like what the Giants did with the second overall pick, even though they tried to build the offensive line at the same time. They got a slot wide receiver. They got a linebacker. Giants have got to fix the O-line, because if you fix the O-line and you become a ground and pound team, it will improve the defense just by default. If you can control the clock and wear down the opponent, you keep your defense fresh, it'll make the defense better. Of course we need to invest in the defense. And of course I would love Isaiah Simmons. I'm not going to cry if they take Isaiah Simmons, believe me. I completely see what people see in this guy. He's a great player. He's going to get after the quarterback. I'm just telling you guys that with this move with Jason Garrett, looking at what it's going to require for this system to work to its highest potential, I'm not going to be shocked at all if the New York Giants go O-line at number 4 or look to trade down and take an O-lineman a little bit later in the first round. For that to happen, you're going to need a team that needs a quarterback. I think the Chargers are a perfect match at 6. There's a couple of other teams. The Raiders, if you want to jump all the way down to 12, you're probably still getting one of these 3 tackles, whether it be Wirfs, Willis, or Andrew Thomas there at 12. So maybe if the New York Giants do have this plan, maybe that's what they look to do. Maybe they look to trade down and get some assets and still get a top-tier offensive lineman. We're going to have to wait and see how it plays out. It may be boring, but these types of pieces are what is necessary to build a strong offense. I showed you that graphic yesterday where the Cowboys ranked top 6 in 4 major offensive categories. Well, the biggest reason for that was the offensive line. And in this specific system, the Air Coryell fly patterns. Fly patterns take a lot longer to run than crossing patterns that are 4 yards over the middle. So for that to develop, you need the offensive line to block. You need them to be able to extend plays for Daniel Jones and open up holes for Saquon Barkley to make the offense less predictable. But that's my take on it. Don't be shocked if we go O-line. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.